All right, let's just jump right in. You gotta picture this, the very first great empire to unite pretty much the entire Indian subcontinent. We're talking a massive territory, all the way from the Himalayas down to the southern coast. This was the Mauryan Empire. And right at the center of it all, you've got this guy, Emperor Ashoka, one of the biggest puzzles in all of history. So, here's the big question we're digging into. How does a man, a conqueror who built his entire empire on brutal force, suddenly, at the height of his power, just renounce war? How do you give up the one thing that made you so powerful? It sounds like something out of a movie, right? But believe me, this actually happened.
You see, to really get Ashoka, you have to realize he was like two completely different people in one lifetime. First, you have Ashoka, that's Ashoka the Fierce, a guy known for his brutal temper and his love of conquest. But then you get Ashoka, Ashoka the Righteous, a king who ruled with morality and peace. So our story today is about how that first guy died and the second one was born.
Yeah, so Ashoka didn't start out as some wise, peaceful ruler. Not even close. His journey to the throne wasn't some dignified ceremony. Nope. It was a brutal, bloody fight to the top, filled with betrayal and violence. His rise to power was a total bloodbath. First off, legends say his own dad, the emperor, couldn't stand him. So when the old man dies, Ashoka doesn't just get the crown, he takes it. With his sharp-witted minister Radhagupta by his side, he fights a nasty 4-year war against his own family. And just to show you how violent this period was, later stories claim he killed 99 of his own half-brothers to make sure no one else could take the throne. Now look, killing 99 brothers? That might be stretching it a bit, to make his later change of heart seem even more dramatic. But here's the thing. This story stuck because the truth was, his rise was incredibly violent. And that's how he got that infamous nickname, Ashoka, a name that basically meant fear itself. And get this, to really cement that reputation, the stories say he built this prison. They called it Ashoka's Hell. Imagine a place that looked beautiful and inviting from the outside, but once you were in, it was just pure, unimaginable terror. That was the whole point. He wanted people to know, you do not mess with this guy. Okay, so we've got our villain, right? Ashoka the Fierce. But every great story has that one moment that changes everything. And for him, it wasn't some spiritual vision or a philosophical debate. It was a war. One single, absolutely devastating war that completely broke him, the conquest of Kalinga. So about 8 years into his reign, he decides to conquer the kingdom of Kalinga. The battle was, well, it was a slaughter. 100,000 people killed just in the fighting alone. It's a number that's just hard to wrap your head around. And the horror didn't even stop there. After the battle was won, another 150,000 people were deported from their homes, or they just died from their wounds in the famine that followed. We're talking about a war that devastated a huge chunk of Kalinga's entire population. It was a victory, sure, but it was a victory built on a mountain of bodies. And this is the moment everything changes. Standing there, looking out at the absolute carnage he'd created, something inside him just snapped. And we know this because he wrote it down himself, carved it right into stone for everyone to see for centuries. He said, "This is a victory of sin." The guilt just crushed him. And right there, on that battlefield, Ashoka, Ashoka the Fierce, was gone forever. So out of the ashes of the Kalinga War, a totally new Ashoka appears. He gets really into Buddhism, but it's not just about finding his own inner peace. He realized he needed a whole new rule book for his empire, one that wasn't about power and swords, but about, well, being good. He called his new philosophy Dhamma. And here's the really clever part. Dhamma wasn't a religion he was trying to force on everybody. It was more like a universal code of ethics. I mean, this was politically brilliant. His empire was this giant mix of different faiths and cultures. If he tried to force one religion on everyone, you'd have rebellions everywhere. Instead, he came up with this set of shared moral values: be kind, be tolerant, that literally anyone could get behind. So what did this Dhamma policy actually look like in practice? Well, first, no more war, period. He even put limits on animal slaughter. Second, he pushed for tolerance, big time. He urged all religious groups to just respect each other. Third, he went all in on social welfare. We're talking hospitals for people and for animals, planting trees along roads. And finally, it was all about promoting basic morality. Respect your elders, be kind to your servants. Simple, powerful ideas. But here's the kicker. How do you get this message out to a massive empire back in the 3rd century BCE? Well, Ashoka's solution was just genius. He carved it into the landscape itself, on giant rocks, on towering pillars, put up all over the empire where people would actually see them. It was basically the world's first mass communication campaign.
But you'd think a story like this would never be forgotten, right? Well, here's the craziest twist of all. After Ashoka died, his empire crumbled. And over hundreds of years, the script on his pillars became a mystery. Nobody could read it. The man who literally carved his legacy in stone was almost completely forgotten. Until his story reemerged, thousands of years later, right when it was needed most.
So, Ashoka dies way back in 232 BCE, and poof, he basically vanishes from history. For over 2,000 years, his words were silent. Then, fast forward to 1837. A British scholar named James Prinsep finally cracks the code. He figures out the script, and just like that, Ashoka is speaking again across the centuries. And the timing was just perfect. As India was moving towards independence, its leaders were looking for a hero from their past who stood for unity and peace. And suddenly, here he was. And his legacy is woven into the very fabric of modern India today. Seriously, you see that wheel in the middle of the Indian flag? That's his, the Ashoka chakra, his wheel of Dhamma. And the national emblem of India, the 4 lions looking out in all directions, that's taken directly from the top of one of his pillars. He wasn't just some old king they dusted off. He became a blueprint for what a modern, tolerant, inclusive India could be. And his ideas are still so incredibly relevant. He had this concept called Vaksamyam, which basically means restraint of speech. He argued that you shouldn't praise your own group by trashing another, because in the end, that just hurts everyone. Now, just think about our world today with social media and all the division. I mean, could there be a more timely message? It feels like he was writing it for us. Which really leaves us with one final thing to chew on. What makes a leader truly great? Is it the size of the empire they conquer? Or the strength of the army they command? Or is it measured by the compassion they show, the society they build, and the peace they work for? Ashoka's incredible journey from a brutal tyrant to a wise ruler seems to point to a pretty clear answer, doesn't it?